So I did something that shocked everyone who knows me. I actually thanked my ex for leaving me. I know. Sounds crazy, right? But let me tell you what happened to me. Because if you've ever been in a relationship where you felt like you were fighting for someone who had one foot out the door, this is gonna hit different. By the end of this story, you're gonna understand why the best thing that ever happened to me was when he finally walked away. And honestly, you might start seeing your own situation in a whole new light. So here's the thing. I spent 3 years of my life trying to convince someone to stay with me. 3 whole years. And I didn't even realize that's what I was doing until it was over. You know that feeling when you're constantly walking on eggshells? When you're always wondering if today's gonna be the day they finally decide you're not worth it? That was my life. Every single day felt like I was auditioning to be his girlfriend. He'd pull away and I'd chase harder. He'd get distant and I'd get more clingy. Looking back now, I can see how exhausting that must have been. For both of us. But at the time, I thought I was fighting for love. I thought that's what you're supposed to do when you care about someone. The worst part is how I started changing myself to fit what I thought he wanted. I stopped hanging out with certain friends because he didn't like them. I changed my hair, my clothes, even the way I talked sometimes. I became this version of myself that I thought would make him want to stay. But here's what I didn't understand then. You can't love someone into loving you back. You can't convince someone to choose you. And you definitely can't hold on to someone who's already mentally checked out. The signs were all there. He'd take hours to text me back, but I'd respond in minutes. He'd cancel plans last minute, but I'd always be available whenever he wanted to see me. He'd talk about his future like I wasn't going to be in it, but I'd just ignore those moments and focus on the good times. I remember one night, we were lying in bed, and I asked him where he saw us in a year. He got this look on his face, like I'd asked him to solve world hunger or something. He couldn't even picture us together that far ahead. But did I take the hint? Nope. I just convinced myself he was scared of commitment, not uninterested in me. The end came on a Tuesday. Isn't it weird how life-changing moments always happen on the most ordinary days? He called me after work, and I could hear it in his voice before he even said the words. That flat, distant tone that meant he'd already made up his mind about something. "We need to talk," he said. And honestly, part of me was relieved. I was so tired of pretending everything was fine when we both knew it wasn't. We met at this little coffee shop near his place. The same one where we'd had our first date, actually. The irony wasn't lost on me. He did that thing people do when they're about to break up with you. Started with all the "you're amazing" and "it's not you, it's me" stuff. But then he said something that actually stuck with me. He said, "I feel like you love me more than I love you, and that's not fair to either of us." In that moment, I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that love doesn't have to be perfectly balanced, that relationships go through phases, that we could work on it. But something in his eyes stopped me. He looked relieved, like he'd been carrying this weight for months and was finally putting it down. That's when it hit me. He wasn't sad about ending things. He was grateful for an excuse to leave. I sat there for a minute, just processing, and then I did something that surprised both of us. I said, "Okay." Not, "Okay, let's work on it." Not, "Okay, but can we try couples therapy?" Just, "Okay." He looked confused, like he'd been prepared for a fight and I'd just completely derailed his whole breakup speech. "That's it?" he asked. And I realized, yeah, that was it. What was I gonna do? Beg him to stay with someone who didn't want to be there? Force him to fake feelings he didn't have? Make both of us miserable for however long I could drag it out? The first few weeks after were brutal. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'd wake up and reach for my phone to text him, then remember I couldn't do that anymore. I'd see something funny and think, oh, he'd love this, then realize he probably wouldn't even respond if I sent it. My apartment felt too big and too quiet. I'd gotten so used to planning my evenings around him that I didn't even know what I wanted to do with my free time. I'd sit on my couch at 7 p.m. and think, now what? But here's where things started getting interesting. After about a month of feeling sorry for myself, I started getting mad. Not at him, but at me. I was mad that I'd spent 3 years trying to be someone I wasn't. I was mad that I'd ignored all those red flags. I was mad that I'd settled for someone who saw loving me as a burden instead of a gift. One night, I was going through old photos on my phone, and I found this picture of me from right before I met him. I looked happy, like genuinely happy. Not the forced smile happy I'd been doing in all our couple photos, but actually content with my life. When had I stopped looking like that? When had I started needing someone else's approval to feel good about myself? That's when I realized something that changed everything. I hadn't lost the love of my life. I'd lost myself. And honestly, getting myself back was way more important than getting him back. So here's the part that's gonna sound crazy. About 2 months after the breakup, I was cleaning out my closet, and I found this journal I'd kept during our relationship. I'd completely forgotten about it. I used to write in it when I was feeling confused or upset, trying to figure out why things felt so hard between us. I sat down and read through the whole thing, and oh my God. It was like reading about a completely different person. This woman who was constantly anxious, constantly doubting herself, constantly trying to decode mixed signals and make excuses for bad behavior. There was this one entry from about 6 months into our relationship where I wrote, "I feel like I'm disappearing. I don't know who I am when I'm with him." And then, 3 pages later, "But I love him so much. I can't imagine my life without him." You guys, I spent 2.5 years after that entry trying to convince myself that feeling like I was disappearing was normal. That love was supposed to make you lose yourself. But reading it all at once like that, I could see the pattern so clearly. Every time I felt small or unsure or not good enough, it was connected to something he'd said or done. Every time I questioned my own judgment, it was because I was prioritizing his opinions over my own instincts. I'd been so focused on the fear of losing him that I'd never noticed I'd already lost myself. That night, I wrote a new journal entry. Just one line. "I want to meet the woman I would have become if I'd never tried to shrink myself to fit into his life." And that became my project. Not getting over him. Finding me. The weird thing about rediscovering yourself is that it's not like flipping a switch. It's more like archaeology. You're digging through layers of who you thought you were supposed to be to find who you actually are underneath. I started small. I signed up for a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to try but never did because he thought it was boring. Turns out, I'm terrible at pottery, but I loved it anyway. There's something about working with your hands, creating something from nothing, that just felt right. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do. Sounds simple, but it was revolutionary for me. For 3 years, I'd said yes to everything because I was so afraid of disappointing people. Now I was learning that disappointing others was way better than disappointing myself. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with. Remember how I mentioned I'd stopped hanging out with certain people because he didn't like them? Well, it turns out those people were actually amazing, and I'd missed them more than I realized. One of them, Sarah, said something to me that really stuck. We were catching up over dinner, and I was telling her about the breakup, and she said, "Honestly, I'm glad he left. You weren't you when you were with him." That hit me hard because it was true. I hadn't been me. I'd been this carefully constructed version of myself designed to keep someone else happy. And the crazy part is, it hadn't even worked. He'd left anyway. I started therapy around this time, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd gotten so lost in the first place. My therapist asked me this question that blew my mind. What would you do differently in your next relationship? And I realized, I wouldn't want a next relationship with someone who required me to be different. I'd want someone who liked me as I am, mess and all. About 4 months after the breakup, something shifted. I stopped checking his social media, not because I forced myself to, but because I genuinely didn't care what he was up to anymore. I was having coffee with another friend, telling her about this realization, and she asked me something that stopped me cold. Do you think you actually loved him? Or did you just love the idea of being chosen by him? I sat there for like 5 minutes just thinking about it. And honestly, I think she was right. I think I'd been so caught up in the challenge of making someone love me back that I'd confused the adrenaline rush with actual love. Real love. The kind I want now. Doesn't make you feel like you're constantly auditioning. It doesn't make you question your worth or change fundamental parts of yourself. Real love feels safe and steady and sure. I'd spent so much time trying to be what he wanted that I'd never even asked myself if he was what I wanted. And the truth is, once I really thought about it, he wasn't. He was attractive and charming and fun when he wanted to be, but he was also unreliable and emotionally unavailable and kind of selfish. I'd been so grateful for his attention that I'd ignored the fact that he wasn't actually a great partner. This was my plot twist, you guys. The big revelation wasn't about him at all. It was about me realizing that I'd been settling for breadcrumbs when I deserved the whole meal. I'd been so afraid of being alone that I'd stayed with someone who made me feel lonely even when we were together. And now that I was actually alone, I felt more connected to myself than I had in years. Fast forward to now, about a year later, and I'm not even the same person who got dumped in that coffee shop. I have boundaries now, real ones. I know what I will and won't accept in a relationship. I know my worth, and I'm not willing to negotiate it anymore. I've got hobbies that are mine, friends who love me exactly as I am, and goals that have nothing to do with anyone else's approval. I wake up excited about my own life, not waiting for someone else to make it interesting. The apartment that felt too big and too quiet? Now it feels like my sanctuary. I've decorated it exactly how I want, filled it with things that make me happy, turned it into a space that reflects who I really am. And here's the thing that would shock my old self. I'm not looking for a relationship. I'm not on dating apps. I'm not hoping to meet someone. I'm not worried about ending up alone. I'm actually enjoying being single. For the first time in my adult life, I'm complete on my own, not waiting for someone else to fill some void or validate my existence. Just whole. A few weeks ago, I ran into a mutual friend of ours, and she mentioned that my ex had been asking about me. Apparently, he'd heard I was doing really well and seemed curious about my life. The old me would have read so much into that. Would have wondered if he missed me, if he regretted leaving, if there was a chance we could work things out. But you know what I felt when she told me that? Nothing. Like, literally nothing. It was like hearing about a stranger. So here's what I want to tell you, especially if you're going through something similar right now. If someone wants to leave your life, let them. Don't beg, don't bargain, don't try to convince them of your worth. Anyone who needs convincing isn't the right person for you anyway. I know it feels like the end of the world when someone you love walks away. I know it feels like you'll never find that connection again, never feel that kind of love again. But here's what I learned. The connection I was mourning wasn't even real. It was one-sided. I was loving someone who was already halfway out the door. The love you deserve doesn't require you to shrink yourself. It doesn't make you feel anxious or insecure or like you're too much. The right person for you will choose you every single day, not because you've convinced them to, but because they can't imagine doing anything else. And until that person shows up, fall in love with your own life. Build something beautiful that's entirely yours. Become the person you were meant to be before you started trying to be what everyone else wanted. I used to think my ex leaving was the worst thing that could happen to me. Now I know it was the best. He gave me the gift of myself back, and honestly, that's worth way more than his love ever was. If you're holding on to someone who's already let go of you, please hear me on this. You're not losing your person. You're making space for them to find you. The woman I am now wouldn't have settled for what I had with him. She would have seen those red flags and walked away herself. She would have known her worth and demanded better. I'm grateful to him for leaving because he did what I was too scared to do myself. He set us both free. So yeah, that's my story. That's how I learned that sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is walk away. If you're watching this and you're trying to hold on to someone who doesn't want to be held, please just let them go. I promise you, the relief you'll feel when you stop fighting for someone who isn't fighting for you is incredible. You are not too much for the right person. You are not hard to love. You just haven't met the person who's ready to love you the way you deserve yet. And in the meantime, love yourself that way. Be your own person. Build your own life. Become someone you're proud to be, with or without anyone else. Trust me on this one. When you stop trying to convince the wrong person to stay, you make room for the right person to show up. And when they do, you'll understand why it never worked out with anyone else. The woman who got dumped in that coffee shop feels like a stranger to me now. And honestly, I'm grateful for that too. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted is the only way to find what you actually need. And what I needed was me. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more honest breakup stories. And remember, you're stronger than you know. Bye.